For instance, in the lumbar spine, if you have someone in seated lumbar and you're palpating, you're doing motion palpation of the lumbar spine, that person is bent laterally and rotated, there's an almost paradoxical combined motion that occurs in the lumbar spine. The same is true for the cervical spine. The miracle that is the human body is so much more complex than you might realize at this juncture in your education. You'll be surprised. But I promise you, by the time you're awarded your degree at Western States, you will have all of the skills and all of the tools that you'll need to succeed in practice. The point of the whole Dynajust project is to speed that up, to clear out class time for more effective, or not more effective, but areas of study that require a one-on-one with the instructor. We're hoping that by developing these programs to the level where they're targeted to very specific portions of the student body, that we can eliminate maybe even 4 to 6 hours a week of class time for palpation and anatomy. So if you've got one of these guys here, it's very beneficial to be able to look at that anatomy as it exists in your analog, in your artificial spine, and think about what all is going on inside that human body as you're moving it and palpating it, looking for fixation lesions, and thinking about what you might do about any particular problem that patient might have. Now, getting back to the X-ray, as it happens, our project manager, Will Despard here, has an unusual clavicle. And Maria here has perfectly normal clavicles. She's never had anything happen to her to rearrange them. She doesn't have any birth defects or variations on normal here. But obviously you're not going to be working on healthy people for the most part, at least not in the beginning. Patients will come to you with some reason, of course, and then when they learn the benefits of being manipulated, being adjusted on a regular basis, of course, you're about to learn why that's very, very important as well. But I want to actually make a little segue here and talk about something that, if Will was your palpation partner, something that you would see. And that's why I mentioned the X-rays. If you have X-rays of each other that you can incorporate into these palpation sessions that you're doing for this project and for your education in general, even though you haven't been through Radinat yet and you haven't even learned how to read an X-ray, I believe that it would be beneficial to go ahead and start thinking about how you're going to be incorporating radiology into your practice ultimately, and in order for you to understand what is normal versus what is not normal, and then even taking that a little bit further, what is not normal but asymptomatic, or what is not normal and potentially troublesome down the road. And these are all things that as doctors you'll be having to think about on a daily basis with every single patient that passes through your office. Now, when you get a new patient, generally in practice, you're going to do a pretty thorough physical examination. And generally your patient would be in a gown. Now, for these demonstration purposes, we're not putting Maria in a gown for every little thing here, but we should have mentioned maybe at the very beginning, when you begin palpating, the first thing you might want to do is look at the skin. I lost a very, very dear friend of mine before I ever even considered going to chiropractic college, and he had been diagnosed with melanoma in his early 20s. They removed it surgically. They removed the lesion. They took a patch of skin about 4 or 5 inches square to be sure that they had gotten the margins of the tumor. And unfortunately, he chose not to follow up with the radiation therapy that was recommended, and no chemotherapy. He figured, I guess, that the surgical solution was going to be ultimately all he would need. Unfortunately, my friend was wrong, and about the time I arrived in Portland to finish up pre-med, my friend came to visit me to say goodbye. And that was something that stuck in my mind all the way through school, something like melanoma, you will see it. You will see it more often than you think you're going to. And I guess the point that I want to make is that when you look at the dermatology textbooks and you look online at what melanoma is supposed to look like, at least in my experience, it rarely looks like, well, sometimes it does, of course, but my point is that sometimes a lesion that looks like it's probably innocent may not be. And some of the worst cases of melanoma that I've had to deal with in my own practice were lesions where it was iffy at best. You've got something here, it doesn't look angry, it doesn't necessarily have all the characteristics of anything dangerous, but let's have that checked out. And very early on in my career, I made alliances with dermatologists. Of course, I made alliances with a lot of doctors early in my practice. I wanted to be the chiropractor in my town that the surgeons would refer to and expect referrals from, and that was something that served me very, very well over the years. I've scrubbed in on more surgeries than I can remember on patients who came to me first, and after examination, maybe even just the initial examination, were referred on. Some of them came to me and I did my best to do what I could for them, but ultimately they ended up on the table anyway. And I was lucky enough to make alliances with some of the very best orthopedic and neurological surgeons in our area, and that's been a very good thing for me, not only as a doctor who wants to know everything I can possibly know about what might be going on with my patients, but also it's been very satisfying in my career to participate in that thing throughout its course. So be sure to always look at the skin, pay very close attention to anything that you see on the skin, and make the appropriate referral in your practice. Okay, we've done just a very rudimentary introduction to cervical spinal palpation, and I'm interested in feedback on what you think of the pace of this. To me, it felt just a little bit slow, but I really want to hear for future installments. We're going to do thoracic spine, and we're going to do lumbar spine, of course, and we might do some extremities in the course of this 3 or 4 weeks that you'll have the Dynagest instrument. But remember, the point of all this is not necessarily to give you a thorough education in anatomy and palpation, but to demonstrate the power of doing it in this integrated methodology that we're trying to develop as a partnership with Western States and the other schools. So one of the other things I wanted to mention was that you can use your x-rays if you have them, and there's the potential that at least someone in your group is going to have some sort of variation on normal that will be interesting for you, even at this level of your education, to look at. And so we just happen to have one here, so we're going to focus on that for just a moment or two.